All right, Dave Toonders. How's it going, my friend?
Mr. Fong, it's been a while.
It's been a while. Um, so before we get started, most important in our pre-call, in preparation, like the people we are, do you have a drink in front of you
I
of your
have,
choice?
believe it or not, a glass of water.
A glass of water. Okay, I'm going to
Yes,
trust that's a glass of water, and you're
yes.
going to have to trust this is a
Coffee.
tea. Yeah,
Oh, tea, sorry.
it's tea. I had enough coffee for one day, that's for sure. 2 to 3
Yeah,
cups in a day. Well, look, hey Dave, thank you for being the official first guest of this podcast.
I'm
So,
honored.
so yeah, and it's this podcast is all about leadership coaching for all our new listeners out there. And what I'm planning to do with folks like Dave here is take industry leaders, and I want to dissect what are the mindsets that they use in order to achieve success, and more importantly, uh, how did they overcome failure, how did they deliver feedback, um, what are the mindsets for resilience. So those are some of the
Mm.
things I'm going to dissect today with Dave. So hopefully keep your hat on, keep your water close by, right, and we're going to have some fun today. Sound good?
Oh, yeah, you might dip into the wine later
Okay, well, I'll press pause here when we do that.
when we do
So
that. Okay.
So, Dave, you are one of the industry leaders. I know. You know, you retired, as you as you mentioned, and you haven't done this for a while. But maybe just let the listeners understand what you've been up to, who you are, where you're from. Let's start there.
Uh, well, it depends on when you want me to start from. I was thinking about the different roles that I've had over the years, and it's kind of where's the beginning, and I've trying to figure out kind of how I evolved through that period of time in the types of companies. Who am I? I have been very much um, focused on uh, understanding kind of how I got to where I am, and I have to really think back to even when I first started with my parents, my family. We were raised on a dairy farm. I was on that dairy farm until I was like almost 22, 23 before I decided to spread my wings, so to speak. And that whole period of, especially on the dairy farm, it's constant. You're 7 by 24. You're working on the farm, and your work ethic is like it's ingrained in you. It's just part of you. And I had that very positive experience with family owned farms. And as a result, job was never done until it was done. You do whatever it takes to get things in place, and you enjoy every moment you have whenever you have accomplishments, you celebrate that accomplishment. It was kind of those types of things that occurred. And I'm sure a lot of people have things from their fathers and mothers that they kind of remember the sayings that they had. And one that really stuck with me for many years, and I kind of have spoke about this with others that I've helped out with, and that is, my dad always believed that you have to listen before you speak. And in fact, he says God only gave you one mouth but two ears, so let's use the ears more than the mouth, and you will learn a lot more and be better prepared to go forward. And I believe that is a core uh, capability ability that you learn very early in life, and if you can do it well, uh, I think that sets you up for success. Who am I? I've been, as I said, a farmer. I've also worked for construction for a couple of years, building bridges, concrete work. Um, that taught me that hard work is part of it, but it also taught me that that's probably something I don't want to do for the rest of my life. It's really kind of motivated me to think about going back to school. And I had this thing about accounting for whatever reason, becoming an accountant. And after my second year, we got introduced to things that were just becoming mainstream. It was mainframes, computers. And we got to learn a little more. And I got so excited about it because it was something that was unique, very technical, it challenged you in different ways that I had never been challenged before. And as a result, I changed my direction. I decided to focus on computers. And that was, from there on, a progression of working at the detail level, the technical level, and then eventually started working in the software industry, working with companies like Sybase, it's like information builders, or organizations that have building tools to deliver applications. And eventually that evolved me to the next level of working with the actual applications. So you're dealing with companies like Siebel, Salesforce, VMware, is part of a building tool, but also helped start talking about things like cloud computing and in virtual realities that VMware was working on at the time before when I left. So that's kind of my background and kind of where the types of influences I've had from a company perspective through those years.
Well, thank you for that, Dave. So I think that's a really great overview of your personal and your professional career and how you ended up, sounds like from dairy farm to server farm. But I want everyone to get to know you a little more. And I actually didn't know about your dairy farm background, or maybe you've told me, I just didn't listen. That your dad would be very upset with me. But tell me about the dairy farm, life on a dairy farm. How was that? What did you enjoy about it? What did you not like about it?
Well, this is we were in a farm just north of London, Ontario, and from a standpoint of as soon as I was able to walk behind the cows and help with milking, I was in the barn 5:30 in the morning. We were milking cows by 6, feeding cattle by probably about 7:30, 8 o'clock, and then we were in the house for breakfast. And the next thing you know, we're out. Well, what needs to be done today? Type of conversation, whether it's harvesting, whether it's planting. We were growing our own corn, hay. I'm one of those guys who had the shorts on and t-shirts that were out baling hay and getting scrapped by all of the grass and so forth. But it toughened me up. And from a standpoint of being in a regimented environment, you couldn't milk cows at 7 o'clock. You had to be there at 5:30. You had to be. You were consistently being drawn back to.
What happens if you actually wait till 7 o'clock? What happens to the cow?
Well, you get potentially milk that's unacceptable in terms of being able to be shipping it, and also cows get sick because the expectations they're moving through the whole process themselves, and consistency and executing on time is very much a part of the farm community. If you, for example, are growing or cutting hay, as an example, the hay has to dry out first, and that's usually a day or two. But if you leave it there for 4 or 5 days, you have the potential of hitting a rainy day, and then the hay is moldy, and then you can't put that in the barn. You have to let it dry. It just consequences of an error leads to greater work, greater activities that's needed to repair or whatever. The other side of it is mechanics. We had tractors, we had combines, we had various types of tools we had to use just to keep things going. You couldn't bring it off to a mechanic and have them look after it because really money was tight. Everything that went into the farm, every dollar had to be accounted for. And if you could fix it yourself or work around it, that is exactly what we did. And so from a standpoint of being very active and being very multi-talented, so to speak, in terms of using different tools, we made mistakes. I know that. But from the mistakes, we learned lessons. And as a result, we got better at it. And I think that's, my dad was a dairy farmer for almost 30 years before he retired. That's the life that we had. And a lot of lessons learned and the perseverance, and also in terms of learning from your mistakes is kind of a key element of that.
Wow. It's I'm hearing a lot of qualities that you learned, a lot of values that you learned, toughening up, being consistent. If you had to do something at 5:30, it had to be done at 5:30. There's consequences, financially as well as, but it sounds like you've learned a lot of that. And I can relate to a lot of that too. And not that I was a dairy farmer in any way, but growing up, my parents my dad was actually did farming, back in the home country when he was young. And yeah, there's a lot of discipline that comes with it. And it translated when he came to Canada, right? And it translated to how we grew up as well, right? Not to say I followed that discipline, up until I think I hit maturity around, 27 or so, right? When I realized, consistency and, this toughness and this, being disciplined at things. I think there's a thing here, right? But it sounds like you learned at a very early age, though, right?
Yeah, but I think your comment about at 27 discovering it, I might be a couple of years earlier than that, but
sounds like 7.
So, yeah, well, no, there are many people who will tell you otherwise. But the whole side of working on the dairy farm, you made the comment about your parents immigrating into Canada. That was my parents. So from a standpoint of having really nothing and starting from scratch, and cutting and clawing your way through to build a family farm, and that was their goal. I think just understanding what they had to go through, and as being part of the family, I have 5 siblings, and I was the oldest. So needless to say, I was the first one to the barn, but the rest of them came very soon after that to help out. But it was a family focused. And so when you think about, we worked day in and day out, you had no fun. I don't remember having thinking that we were in a bad shape. We actually were enjoying life. We had time to play. My father was a bit of a soccer player when he was in Holland, and he would be kicking the ball in between the 5 minutes or the 10-minute break we take. Yeah. And it could be out in the middle of a field. Somehow that soccer ball showed up, and we'd be kicking it around for a little while. So we found ways of enjoying what we were doing, and I think that's parcel what I keep in mind is that whatever I'm doing, if I'm not enjoying it, if it's something that's not something that I feel makes me better or happier or whatever the case may be, why do I do it? What else should I be doing, or what could I be doing? And I think that thinking it from that perspective is something that's got ingrained in me pretty early.
So let's fast forward for a second to where you are now personally. You're retired.
Yes.
I remember that. I heard you, right? Your dad would be proud of me there, right? But I remember being at your retirement party. It was quite the occasion. And I have to tell you now publicly, on this podcast, that it was at that moment when I saw how many people attended your retirement, Dave, right? People flew in on their own dime. That's when I said to myself, what kind of leader do I want to be? I want to be that leader where people will fly in for my retirement on their own dime. And that was probably the start of my personal own finding purpose in what I'm doing, right? It's not just about titles, money. I really put that aside much more, because no one really cares when you're retired. No one cares what your title was, right? But people care how you make them felt, right? And I know people still call you to this day asking for advice, Dave, right? So I'm curious about, now in retirement, how do you find purpose?
How do I find purpose? I obviously got access to some of your questions before, and I was struggling with that one. And the reason I was struggling with that, it was And the retirement party was February of 2020, just before the pandemic broke loose. So March 2020, all of a sudden we're starting to hear about this pandemic coming and people shutting down, and put up the shutters on the windows. We gotta fight this thing. It's like, okay, I'm starting my retirement. I'm going to be locked up in the house for whatever period of time. And I had to really think, what can I find to do? And the purpose may have to be delayed for a while. This is kind of the way I looked at it. But as it turned out, I went through a lot of change right after that retirement. I had got married, believe it or not, in the middle of the pandemic.
We're going to dig into that one in a second.
Yeah. I got married. I sold 2 houses and I bought 2 houses in that period of time. So between the selling and the buying of houses, it was that was basically my purpose, was getting those things in place and walking through it, and it kept me and my wife very busy. And so and in fact, right now the house is under renovation. In terms of the last one, we've decided to say this is our forever house, and we're renovating it again. I think in the next year will be basically where we'll be at that point. And then after that, I think purpose is going to be focused more around our family. I think we've talked about this before, where travel is going to become a big part of what we would like to do. My wife used to be doing a lot of traveling worldwide. I did travel, but mostly in North America. So we're looking at opportunities to go to, like past spring, we went to Costa Rica. Last year we went to Spain, and we've taken time out to do those types of things. And beyond that, there's a lot of volunteer work, availability for people to participate in volunteering in this area that we've moved into. And so that is something that we are actively pursuing right now.
It's a breath of fresh air, Dave. Just to think about like all the things you have going on and how you adapted, especially when 2020 hit. And I call it the before, right? Before your retirement was the before. But I do believe there was a lot of a lot of our lives, most of our life, like for myself too. I spend it at work.
Mm-hmm.
Most of the time, it's work. And
Yep.
so I think about like, how would I, if I was to stop working one day, like you have, where would I find purpose? Right. So I guess like when you think about how you transition in the funniest time to retirement, what advice could you give people who are right now, let's just say early in their careers, 30s, 40s, 50s, whatnot, and they're thinking about retirement? What would you suggest for people to prepare for that next stage of life?
So at 40 or 50, you're thinking about retiring. Wow, you're really planning ahead there.
I like to plan some things.
Yeah.
Most things no. Yeah.
I think, when you're at 40 and 50, and again, I have to go back a few years to think about that. It's something that things like security, financial security, come to mind, because you're in the middle of your at 40 to 50. You're probably at kind of looking at your peak or close to your peak of earning capability in terms of knowledge and experiences, and bringing to the table, and building a financial security in terms of what's going to happen after that is critical. I think, and this is one of those regrets I have in terms of my career, is not spending enough time with the family. And I believe that if I had really paid more attention at that when I was like the 40 to 50 range of my time at work, I think I would actually be I would be probably in a better place with that than I really would want to be. I think you have to focus on your family. You have to focus on your personal health, welfare, financial security. And again, I'm speaking more to the personal side of it. From a business perspective, I think the whole aspect of you have now built up a war chest of networking opportunities. You've got a lot of contacts as a result of not just people you work with, but also if you're in a customer-facing role or customer-facing support role, you have a lot of customers now. And some of the mentors and coaches that I've had in my past came from those customers. And in terms of business value, in terms of personal value, in terms of personal success, I think some of the best advice I ever got was from the customer. And so I think when you're sitting at the 40 to 50 year range, you need to pool all those types of resources together. And so, you can kind of lay out what your plan is for the next 10 to 15 years when you decide to retire. And we use the word retire. I'm not so sure that's the best word. We're just looking at the next phase in our life. And that could be more work. It could be, volunteering. It could be focus more on family. It's something else you're doing, not necessarily the word retired.
Well, purpose, as you were saying, right?
Yeah.
We got to find our purpose still. You mentioned family. You wish you spent more time with family.
Mm-hmm.
It sounds like you accomplished, one of the biggest deals in your life during the pandemic. You said you got married.
Yeah.
What can you share about that?
About getting married?
Yeah, during the pandemic.
I don't know how to phrase it. I think I got lucky, and people think that you go through life and you work for everything, and it's by planning. You got your goal, you've got it all set, and you're going to tick off the check boxes of all the to-dos, and you're going to move forward. And I have to say that one of the things that I strongly believe is that I had a lot of luck through my career, being in the right place at the right time, having had the right connection with the right people. The situation with after retiring and meeting Sherry, it's actually funny. A person in our network, our joint network, turned out to, she said, "Hey, Dave, I'd like you to introduce you to somebody." And then that's why she did with Sherry. And it was that network that brought us together. And, it's like hand in glove type of thing that it's just evolved, and it was pretty, exciting. And it's kind of like a second term, because I was married before for 33 years. And when my wife passed away due to cancer, and I went through a tough time after that. But as I was going through that period, again, my network came to my rescue and got me involved and get me active. And, I wasn't sitting at home lamenting. So I had a chance to, again, revitalize. And as time passed, and I got invited to for an opportunity at Salesforce as a manager. So I took that. And then that, again, it's like, a little over 2.5 years I was there. And then I really enjoyed that, and it got my head around from going from loss of a loved one to enjoying life again. And that to me is, something that, getting married and getting all this travel in and everything else, it just kind of, gets you going again. And I think that's what I've loved about the whole thing. And then getting married in the pandemic, I know a lot of people were out there trying to get schedule places to have their ceremony, and then all of a sudden, you can't have the ceremony because. So for us, it was just a good friend and a former employee of mine offered his dock,
Mm-hmm.
and just the four of us with the officiant, we had a ceremony. That to me was the sacrifice on the part of my friend, yeah, and his wife, and then it was a wonderful event, and it's something that's going to be stuck in our mind forever, to be blunt. So I think you have tragedies, but you don't just sit and worry about what that tragedy was about. Reach out to your network, reach out to people around you, and you'd be surprised, very surprised as to how quickly you can work through it.
Well, thank you for sharing that, Dave. That's a wonderful story. It's this might be the same friend we're talking about said to me years ago. Actually, a lot of times, an opportunity will come knocking, but you won't be ready for that opportunity.
Yeah.
You're not looking. So be ready. And
yeah, we're talking about the same guy.
I think we're talking about the same guy, right? Both of us respect this person.
Yeah.
Well, look, it sounds like a lot of what you've been through in your life. It started on the dairy farm, toughening you up, driving consistency, the discipline, the 5:30 every morning milking the cows. I do want to transition now, talking about more of the professional side of Dave Toonders. And you mentioned, you went from the dairy farm to construction to discovering a mainframe. So let's talk about mainframes for a second. And then, for the folks out there listening to this who might not know the approximate time period of when a mainframe actually existed, talk to folks about that. Like, what's this mainframe thing?
Well,
I do know what it is.
Yes, I know you do. Gordon Moore passed away just in the last few days, I think. And if anyone's
Moore's Law,
if anyone's followed that, it's kind of an amazing trek, and starting in the 50s and right through to the 70s and early 80s. I don't know, mid 70s. Mainframes were these clunking big machines that filled an entire room, and you had air conditioning systems pumping out all the heat that was being created by these things. And those very same mainframes in terms of computing power probably would fit now into one of these.
Yeah.
And so from a standpoint of evolution of the chip and the growth in terms of computer usage, initially it was used as an accounting machine. Now people are thinking, how can I apply it in terms of databases and applications and building applications that could be distributed? Those were the kinds of thought process that were still very early in the mid 80s. And that was 78, I think, is when I started working with computers at 3M. And I had a very unique situation where I was not part of the IT department. I was hired by the financial controller of the company here in Canada. And they had this thing called time sharing. And time sharing was basically you rented time on a mainframe, and you could build whatever applications using whatever tools, productivity tools you could have. And my goal or my mandate was to help all these accountants put together little programs that allowed them to be a little more efficient, in terms of I don't have to sit here in front of a calculator and type in all the numbers and get the final total. Now I can run that through that little program on the computer. That was for 4 years, just this whole concept of time sharing and the ability for users to talk about and access power that'll make their job a little easier. And, compared to some of the things we do today, we maybe think of it as being nothing, but to them at that time, it was huge. And
what, were these a punch card days still, or were you using,
no, we were using the terminals, green screen terminals. And, so from that standpoint, toward the end of my career with 3M, before I moved to Toronto, we had our first computer laptop come in. And that laptop was probably about half the size of my desk, but it wasn't a laptop as far as I was concerned. But there was this product called VisiCalc that had been released to run on these little desktops. And that became the first spreadsheet. So I'm coming from a period in time when we were dealing with the first generation of spreadsheets, and Microsoft very quickly thereafter with Excel and so forth, and they evolved. But what was interesting about that was we really started to see different uses for the computer. It wasn't just now an accounting machine; it was also tracking projects. We were able to document in terms of tasks and then publish those tasks on a piece of paper from a very slow printer. So when I went to Toronto and moved in with Clarkson Gordon, my mandate on the hiring was to build a partner management system, which is basically the accounting books for the partnership. And the key was to build a data dictionary. Now, I'm using probably terms that makes no sense, but for right now, the data dictionary is just a descriptor of what the data is. And as a result,
metadata
is
of the data.
Data of the data. And I put this all and wrote it in a little product called Focus, a company got Information Builders. And it was something that they had never seen done. For whatever reason, whatever process I went through, they had never seen it being done before. And I said, it made sense to me. At that point, Information Builders offered me a job to come in there and help them build and qualify where we could take it from there. And it was about that time when I was starting to get introduced to different types of managers. In the traditional 3M, Clarkson Gordon, it's very hierarchical, very, you didn't do anything beyond what you were told to do. When we worked with Information Builders, this is the first time you've ever heard of the term system engineer, SE. So from that standpoint, it was a pre-sales role, and I would be helping customers understand how they could use the tool, the Focus tool at that time.
Yeah, and Dave, for the folks who don't know out there, maybe just briefly explain what a pre-sales or systems engineer actually
okay.
does.
I may have made an assumption that this was going to be focused on coaching, but SE.
This is for the world.
Okay.
You're on the world stage right now, Dave.
Oh yeah.
I'm sure you didn't plan that in retirement.
No. Well, maybe. I won't say that. There could be still possibilities.
The opportunity might hit you.
Just we'll see when, and we'll roll with the punches, I guess is the word they use. Systems engineer, a pre-sales system engineer, is a very, what I would call a technical individual who understands computing, who understands how to build applications in most cases, who really understands the product that the computer software company is bringing to market. They help the sales organization. As we all know, nobody trusts the salesman, but they do trust the person who technically will tell you how it works. Mm-hmm. So it's an important role in the sales process. And whether you're talking about presenting what can be done, building something, And as time progressed, we, as system engineers, were able to build things, pretty complex applications, and roll them out as demos or as prototypes. And as years passed, this became very strong sales tool for organizations to build credibility around whatever the software that they were selling. And this is a role that was not fee based. We tried to put dollars against it to say, this is what it really would have cost if you had done this by yourself. But from a standpoint of supporting the sales strategy, sales programs that we put into place, and also from a standpoint of customer facing, constantly in front of the customer and educating, training, and listening and understanding where we could potentially help them. Mm-hmm. So I don't know if you want to add to that, David.
Oh, you know a lot about this, right? It's not.
No. yeah, but when you're talking about current audience, not an audience from 30 years ago.
Well, no, I think the definition hasn't really changed, right? And no. Obviously that role where, you're basically the translator of taking very complex concepts in software and technology and translating it to a business audience and helping them understand in layperson terms what this is. We could make an iPhone as complicated as you want, right? We can go into the bits and bytes, right? But the beauty of someone like Steve Jobs is that he's both technical, but he was also able to translate this to a world audience and make it relatable. That's what a good solution engineer, sales engineer, system engineer is able to do, right? In essence, depending on the company where you're in, right? It can vary. I've been in roles, pre-sales roles where it was very technical, right? And I appreciated that, right? Then there's other roles where it's more of a consultant type of role, right? Where you have to understand the technology well. So that's what I would add on to, what you're saying there. But the essence of the role hasn't really changed. And it's changed my life, I can tell you, right? It's changed my life a lot in my trajectory of my career and my leadership career as well. Right.
And the opportunities as a system engineer, a sales engineer, for many years, we debated internally in terms of engineering management teams, how do we define a career path for system engineers? And that was part and parcel of one of the challenges of a manager. In all the years that different companies that I've worked with, we've all had the same challenge, is how do we establish a person's need to grow, to acknowledge successes, and have them an opportunity to expand their knowledge, because these people are technical. They really want to continue their growth in their knowledge in most cases. Some of them actually may become salespeople. I haven't seen too many successes of that transition, but it does happen, where you go from technical, customer believes everything you say, to a salesperson where, no, I want to talk to the techie. I don't want to talk to the person carrying the sales card.
Yeah.
So anyway, that's thank you for the addition there. But so that was the role I had at Information Builders, and I was starting to work. It was a very small group. There's three of us in Canada for this organization at the time, and the company was looking to expand across Canada. 6 offices, I think we ended up with, and so forth. And at the time, the SE manager was very much focused on the local area, Toronto. And I spent a lot of time with the sales exec who was running Canada at the time and doing different sales calls and being part of his visiting customers and so forth. And he was probably one of my most influential mentors of my career. He was a former Syncom sales manager. That Syncom was the first database to run on a mainframe after IBM's DB2 relational product. Sorry, it was a relational product. And so he had a lot of experience in this high-tech industry in the sales side. And there were so many things that he told me as we were traveling together and highlighting, things, the simplest thing of traveling, always have a backup shirt and pants in your luggage that you're carrying on, because you have no idea if that bag that you've checked is going to arrive. And so, little things like that. It was kind of interesting, but the biggest one that he passed on to me was the whole aspect of the customer. If the customer has a need and you have a solution that potentially could solve that need, you just need to prove that that's what it is. If the customer doesn't have a need, let's move on. Like, the customer will respect that you don't waste their time.
Yeah.
And now that to me is listening to the customer, understanding what the business pain was, and to see if we had a solution. And if we didn't have the solution, move on. That was kind of the big lesson from Larry. But the thing that I think is getting to know him and understand his management style, and he was very much focused on mentoring people all the time. So he was kind of my first positive influence in terms of management, and kind of got me thinking about, is this something I could do to manage people? Because the individual who was the manager at the time was going through challenges at the time and had decided to move on. So I was asked to start hiring. And between my mentor and myself, I think we opened up within 2 years 6 offices and had over 60 people in Canada at that first couple of years that we were managing. And that was kind of my first foray into management. And it's a growth. It was a startup for all intents and purposes. It was well established in the States, but the sales offices in Canada were unknown at the time. So we built a pretty good base. It's still in place. As far as I checked last time, Information Builders is still, it's actually called InfoBuild here in Canada. But from a standpoint of, it still exists. And it's a private company. So the beauty of the private company is you get to know the owner. Mm-hmm. And that was, I guess, the other aspect of Information Builders is understanding kind of what drives a software company and how to work within it. And that, to me, was a positive. But I will say that Information Builders was the start of something that, in some ways, I regret. And that is, I took my eyes off family. I was so busy in terms of the startup process. I would be leaving on the road first thing Monday morning or Sunday night, and I'd be flying back in on Friday night. And that trying to crunch a family time into that weekend was one of the toughest things we could have done. So it's a continued regret through the years that I was working. And I could have probably done a better job there, but that's something for new managers and for, people who are in the 40, 50 range. This is something I would say you need to focus on. You need to, prepare yourself to be able to balance that. Because it's going to impact you later, regardless of what you think right now. It's going to impact you later if you don't.
So if you don't mind to dig into that, you
Mm-hmm.
mentioned the word regret. It's something you regret. So if you had to go back and do it, what would you do differently?
Time management. The whole aspect of the getting on a plane on Monday morning and coming back on Friday afternoon was basically relatively assumed. It was expected by management. And I think what I would have done differently is really kind of focus on trying to understand exactly what's driving that and how I can make adjustments so that either we place people who are closer to the requirement from the customers, or be able to facilitate an agreement that would highlight in terms of these are kind of the boundaries. And honestly, I would have included my spouse as part of that conversation, because this was just imposed on us. It wasn't something that, over time, we quickly had agreed that this was going to, there was no really time spent in terms of understanding the dynamics of that. I take exception to that from standpoint of it was my fault for doing that. So that's, again, involving her as part of the conversation, so we have an understanding of kind of where the pressures are and why, and then getting my management to understand and we work through how we might be able to address that.
Yeah, it's boundaries. That's a conversation I have a lot with team members, as well as myself, by the way. Right, I'm no exception. Right, I have to have that conversation. Especially like with things changing constantly, restructuring, whatever it might be. Right, like the world's always changing. There are certain boundaries that are always going to be pushed. Right? And I understand what you say. Like I personally, I try to be very conscious about boundaries. Like there are certain boundaries that can't be crossed, right? Like what is, we talk about negotiating, what's your bottom, right? But when it translates to your life, right, in the negotiation of life, we don't, some of us, or a lot of us, right, sometimes we have to stop and think, well, what is that bottom that can't be crossed, right? And when do I walk away? Now, but like yourself, like I think a lot of it's just a discussion with folks, finding options, finding alternatives, right? There's always an alternative.
Yeah.
It's a matter of, will it be accepted, right?
But the other side of that, David, is that you have to know what your limits are and what your boundaries. You have to be prepared to make the decision that that's a boundary I'm not going to cross. And I think one of the things that I've discovered over the years is that there's no such thing as there's no other job out there. There's always something there, especially with talent in the technology industry. Whether you're talking pre-sales or post-sales or sales or development, whatever the case may be, there's always a role out there. Yeah. And it's just a matter of deciding kind of the role that you have versus the role that you can get or can find. What will satisfy your goals and your values. I think that's I've seen people make that decision and leave the company because they felt that it was infringing on a boundary that they were not willing to cross, and so the company has to respect that.
Well, I respect the individual as well, right? For being confident and understanding where their boundaries are, because as how we started this whole chat was about finding purpose and retirement. No one really cares at the end of the day how many more deals you closed, right? It really, right? And honestly, like I reflect on it right now, and I've seen friends and family friends where they're still reminiscing about the good old days, quote unquote, right, from 30, 40 years ago, and it's like the proverbial movie where the guy is talking about his high school football days, right? And that's was glory day. That scares me, honestly, Dave. To if I end up doing that, and I'm conscious not to do that, which is why this is actually kind of cathartic to talk about it, right? Because I know where my boundaries are personally, right? And fortunately, I work for leadership, and I work for an organization that respect it, right? And I'm very thankful for that, honestly. But like as you said, it's just a job at the end of the day, and it doesn't define me. It doesn't define who I am. My kids don't care where I work. They just care that, hey, Daddy, you're home. Awesome. But the traveling story, it reminds me of, Dave? when at one point, when I was an individual contributor, I was traveling so much. First of all, I had points, status.
Yeah.
But the more important thing was my son was very young at the time. He's a teenager now. At one point, he was like, "Oh, Daddy, you're going again. Where are you going?" He was so young, and I came to a point where he's like, I was like, "Son, I'm leaving." "Okay, I'll see you when you're home, Dad." And I was like, "Oh, crap, I'm traveling too much."
Yeah.
And that's when you're like, "All right, something's got to give now, right? Something's got to change." So, yeah, that feeling, it's stuck with me to this day. When my son just turns his back, he's 2-3 years old at the time, and he's like, "Okay, I'll see you when you're home."
Yeah. It was.
That sucked.
There's a story.
That broke my heart.
There's a story in Information Builders. There was a VP of marketing, and he had a beard, and he was always on the road, constantly traveling. And one day he came into work and said, I need to go down one level, or I'm going to be looking for another role somewhere else that doesn't allow me to travel as much. So when he was asked why, he relayed the story that this was a Monday, that the previous Friday he arrived home, got out of the taxi from flying in, came out of the taxi, and his son was sitting on the lawn, and the neighbor was outside. And the child ran to the neighbor saying, "Daddy." The neighbor had a dad had the beard, but so did the neighbor.
Oh, wow.
So it's that was one of those sobering moments.
Yeah.
That's how we say. But
and unfortunately, Dave, I think it takes, when times are good, I think you just take things for granted.
Yeah.
Right. And it's, I'll give you another one of my philosophies, like, getting recommendations from people, right? I don't do it in bad times when I'm desperate. I'm doing it when I'm happy in my job, right? I keep it up. When I was early in my career, during the .bomb crash, right? That was my first job in a startup. One day it's like, "Hey, welcome to the team, Dave." Next day it's, "We can't pay you all. Can you just hold off for another month?" You're like, "Oh, crap." Then it became, "Today's everyone's last day."
Mm-hmm.
Right? And it taught me a big lesson early in my career. Always have a resume polished and ready to go, right? And do it when you're happy. Do it when times are good, because when times are bad, you're not going to have the right state of mind to do this right.
I would add something to that. This isn't just a resume. This is part of your network, and reaching out to that network on a regular basis, whether the good time or bad time. Usually you'll get those calls anyway in the bad time, but when the good times are going, it's building credibility also within the network that you have. This is a very small industry, contrary to what some people might say. I could probably say there's about 200. When I became an SC for the first time, we probably could have counted probably about 200 people were what I would say qualified as SEs out there. There's a lot more now. The whole advent of social networking and stay at home or selling, it's obviously increased the volumes that we have to deal with. But I find keeping that network aware in terms of where your successes are, your accomplishments, even if it's verbal. I honestly believe, and I think I'm a good example of that, is that when you leave a company or have decided to make a change, it's not a matter of I got to wait months or years to find that next job. It's in most cases it turned around in like 3 weeks, 4 weeks.
Yeah.
And I was looking forward to a long vacation, and next thing I know, I have this letter of offer. So
Sucks to you.
it start all over again. Yeah.
Well, actually, we'll decide if we want to edit this next question out. Okay.
Oh.
But,
Okay.
you know what? You said you had this mentor of yours. I remember us years ago having a conversation about loose lips sink ships, and you talked about how you and some salesperson were sitting on an airplane, and then the competing company was sitting right in front of you talking about their plan. Do you remember that?
Yep. No, that's my mentor. Really, the idea of him mentoring me was whenever and however we were, or wherever we were, in front of the customer, in front of the plane, on, driving from a rental, there was always something that he kind of highlighted or picked out or whatever. And this flight was from Toronto to Vancouver, so it's a long flight. Mm-hmm. And we were sitting there, and I had my laptop, and I was doing something, and Larry reached over and just closed the laptop. And I was like, what? And then he says, we're not talking business. We're not talking about who we're. I was going, why? It's like, just get your pen and paper out. Okay. So I got my pen and paper out, and he kind of leans over and he says, the two guys ahead of us, they're our competition. He knew the sales rep for our major competition, company called Ramus. And he says, listen to what they're saying. And they were talking about their strategies of their visits of all the companies they were visiting in Vancouver the next day. So we're writing down who they're visiting and when, because they were putting calendars and writing it up. And we literally, when we landed, Larry went right to the phone, called up all these individuals, because it's a small world in terms of who's selling what to whom, and then kind of the products that we're selling. So he called them up, and we were able to get in front of and visit the customer before the Ramus sales rep showed up. So they had a conversation with us, and I think it was about a year or 2 years later, this individual, the sales rep from Ramus, was looking for a job. So he was interviewing, and his commentary is, I can't believe what you guys can do. Because this one time that wherever we went, you were already there, and you'd already closed on us. He says, like, I don't know how you did it, but you guys were fantastic. It's like, yeah, you have to take into consideration everything you see and hear, but you also have to be aware of what's around you. And that was, especially when people travel as much as they do or did. I think you have to be conscious of people around you.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Those are probably the fun, some of the fun stories from your past. And it reminds me of a story too, where this is years ago too, I was on site with a rep, and one of our largest competitors shall remain unnamed. We were going to go easy. We weren't going to even name our competitors. We knew it was a head-to-head presentation. But the sales rep got there before me, basically overheard in the conference room while she was waiting outside the presentation of our competitor to the committee. And then she calls me as I'm on my way there, says, Fung, we're going to lay it on thick. I go, what do you mean? Those bastards are over there presenting right now, and I hear every word they're saying, and they're throwing garbage about us, right? So I'm like, all right, cool. I'll put my dancing shoes on, and we went in there and we laid it on thick. It's like, oh, so what they probably said to you right before this was this. Well, that's false, right? So we do everythhen that they said, right? So it's not exactly the same, right? But no. I guess the story there is soundproof your rooms if you're going to have a head-to-head.
Yeah, but expect what you don't expect. It's not the way. That's not the way you should say it. But expect the unknown. I have another little story where we were selling to the government and competing on bids from the federal government, and the government had arranged that all of the competitors or the people who were presenting their solutions for this project was 4 days long, and each one. The thing is that it was well known that most of the sales reps from the different companies were from out of town, so they would have to stay at a hotel, and they would stay typically at the Westin Hotel in Ottawa. And so our sales rep, the day before, would call up in the evening and cancel the reservation of the team that was presenting the next day.
That's evil.
Needless to say, that disrupted the people when they came in to check in. But you have to think about that. There's many ways that you can be torpedoed, or you can, people can kind of set traps for you on the way. But that to me is part of the selling part of it. Yeah, that's not fair. It's not a valid cry. It's just okay. You have to roll with it. So they tried to do the same thing to us. So it was something that we were prepared for, and not to get upset about it, because what they're really trying to do is get your goat, and so that you're not up to your A game when you step into that room. So expect that to happen. Expect something's going to go wrong. Just don't take quick action. Just think about it. Work through kind of, okay, how do I get around this? How, what's important to me is kind of the thing that I would highlight here.
So, Dave, what I respect about you is how you keep such a straight face, and you're so laissez-faire about how you ruined people's sleep. How you destroyed the competition, right? I mean, even if you weren't the one canceling it, you're a party to that. That crime there, right?
Yeah,
So.
yeah. Well, just knowing that it was happening, that was bad enough.
All right, yeah. So you say it with a straight face, but perhaps that's that's the dairy farmer in you, the toughened up and just suck it up, Buttercup, right?
Yes. I can give you some stories in that one.
Well, I do want to move forward. Actually, let's talk about you're talking about good mentors in life, expecting the unexpected, in your career as well as in your life. Let's talk about your leadership career. I do want to see if you can impart on the audience today, like, in leadership, what memorable failures. I'm not going to ask about your successes. We already talked about that, canceling reservations, screwing the competition. Let's talk about some of your biggest failures and where you're willing to go there. And let's see if you can say it with a straight face. That'd be even more fun to see.
I had, that was one of my bigger challenges is do I have any of those?
Oh, you never failed? Okay. Humility should go into those your qualities.
Oh, there you go.
I don't make mistakes. It's not.
No. It's. Well, I'm delaying here because I'm trying to collect my thoughts on it. Biggest mistake I think and it's not. It didn't happen once. It happened more than once. And as a manager, that will happen. Is hiring the wrong person, and it has a double effect on you and your team. One, you now have if you have a misfit. I'm going to apologize for the words I'm using here, but a person who does not fit the role or cannot perform on the role. First of all, you are now you are invested in making me either win or be succeed, or now you have to work your plan to get them out. Mm-hmm. And that's one part of it. The second part of it is the team that you are hiring this individual into. And I'm not just speaking about the other SEs that report to you. I'm also talking about sales reps. I'm talking about all of the people who are impacted by that person's role. And so from that standpoint, to me, that would be my greatest failures. And I use a plural because it happened more than once. And I think, why did it happen? Not taking the time to fully qualify. And again, the manager takes responsibility, 100% responsibility for this hire. So from the standpoint of the last person to check the box, he needs to be fully aware of all the things that occurred in the conversations. And when you are growing, for example, I'll take the VMware, I'll take the Siebel, and I'll take the information builders. Situations where these things happened, we were fast growth, real fast. I was hiring 3-4 people a month. Now the pipeline you have to go through to get to those 3 or 4 people is huge, and we still have this limited number of people that are out there in this industry who have experience. And we were being motivated to build the teams as quickly as possible because that's the growth that we were looking to get into quickly, revenue growth and customer base growth, and beat the competition in terms of certain areas that we were being underrepresented. And as a result, we took shortcuts. And because we took those shortcuts, we left the potential of a misfit coming into the play. And that to me, it's very expensive. And I don't mean about the hiring cost. I'm talking about the long term, your time, your team's time, people who are impacted by that. Morale. And morale is that's a good one to call out because challenges occur in terms of when people see the wrong person, and your team knows it. They know it. It's kind of one of those things. And how did I try and resolve to make sure that they didn't happen? I started getting people involved in the interview process that were on the team, senior members, and in most cases, who have been in that role or who were part of the team that was being focused on. So as a result, I think that helped reduce the bad hires numbers. But I also think it gave an opportunity to mentor the SE that I brought in. There's something that I really strongly believe in as a manager. You're only as good as your succession plan because things will change. The rate of change in our organizations is phenomenal in terms of the industry, I should say. And whether you potentially have a promotion opportunity or restructuring occurs and now you're moved off to another group, like that never happened at Salesforce. Then you have the opportunity from a standpoint of being promoted. You're helping some other SEs recognize the fact: is this a job that I would like, if from a growth perspective, or taking some other perspectives in terms of, hey, I was thinking of wanting to be a manager, but not after what I've just gone through. I don't want to go through the headache of hiring somebody. I prefer to be more involved in the project or a technical activity or whatever the case may be. It helps solidify career paths to involve those people. So I think that's how I was able to try and drive the number of mistakes down. You're still going to make a mistake.
Involving other people.
Involving
in
other
the
people.
hiring process, right?
Yeah.
It's very interesting. I remember talking to this one individual years ago, like yourself. I've been in a hyper growth situation, right? Starting with a team of like less than I can count them on one hand to like having, over 30 people in
that was direct.
Yeah.
Management. Yeah.
Well, it went from direct management to hybrid, first line and second line, and then it went to pure second line, and that was crazy, but it was some of the best lessons ever, right? Like hiring the wrong person. I have this unofficial ratio I share with folks. Out of 10 people you hire, no matter how good your hiring process is, you're going to have at least 10%, 1 out of the 10, that is just not going to work out. And sometimes it's beyond your control, right? That person could be the right person at the moment, but for whatever reason, life circumstances, their motivations, whatever it might be, things change in people's lives, and it might not be the right job for them that you're in, right? But like yourself, it's I mentioned morale. Like the long-term morale is, one of the biggest lessons I learned was if you don't deal with problems early, and your team doesn't see visibly, even if you are dealing with it, they got to see that you're dealing with it, right? Because that affects morale long-term, right?
Yep.
Now, obviously within boundaries, there's only certain things you can disclose. But yeah, I mean, you can win a battle, proverbial battle with a lot of motivation and hype. That's one battle. But the long-term grind of things, if you don't have morale, you could take a lot of A players and they'll be, grinded into the ground because they're covering for someone who's not pulling their weight for whatever reason, right? So, but these are some good lessons here, Dave. Succession plan involving people in the hiring process. I am curious, like, what about for yourself? Like when you think about a memorable coaching moment you've given someone else in leadership, you as a leader delivering to someone else, what comes up when I ask you that?
There was an individual. Which would this be? This would be. I have to actually look. Siebel. One of the things that Siebel had, all other SEs do, is give what they call a technical architecture pitch. It was one of the certification processes for promotions and things like that for sales engineers.
Yep.
And I had a particular individual who kind of mailed it in. I traveled in to get his certification because at the time we didn't really have things like Zoom or anything that I could work remotely. So I literally had to fly in to see this.
So this whole hybrid work thing, remote work thing, that never existed, huh?
Well, let me see here. When did that start? Yeah, that's relatively new technology. It's relative to other things. Believe me, I don't know if I would really sign up for it. To be honest with you, because the personal interaction, the body language, the measurement of a person once they step outside of the controlled environment. Those are things that are part of your conversation, part of your getting to know people, and that's on in person. And use it sparingly because of financial or because of the way the company wants to operate. But I think it's still valid. Anyway, I made this trip, and there was like 3 people I was going to be certifying on this presentation. And the first 2 went through pretty quickly. But I was comfortable with where they were at. And I know the individual that we mutually knew managed these individuals. So from that standpoint, I felt comfortable that they were going to be looked after. But this other individual just stood up there and mailed it in. And about halfway through, I got up and I said, you're going to do it over again. And, here's my observation. There's two items that I said to him. It had nothing to do with the presentation. It was him walking back and forth. And I said, I could literally map out on the floor where he stepped. And he was going back and forth as he was talking. He wasn't paying attention to the audience. And that was the second part of it. And so he's kind of like, oh. So he went back and said, no, we went through it. He corrected a couple of items. And about halfway through, I stopped him again. And we're now running about 4:00. I have a 6:00 flight heading home. And I went through it again, kind of the points that I was trying to make and see if he would adapt to it. And he did very nicely. And then he did his third trial. And I kind of stopped him again halfway through. And he's looking at me. He's like, what? You got a 6:00 flight. He wasn't thinking about, okay, what am I doing wrong? How do I improve? And, I need to get that information now because really I would have to fly back in. And I said, that's okay. I can fly out tomorrow. We can be here all night until you get it right. And it wasn't until he got it right the next time, but I let him get off it. And it wasn't until it was about a year later, he came to me and he says that was probably the best thing that he'd ever gone through because it really forced him to understand what my problems were, and not necessarily with the topic or whatever, but listening to kind of how I was critiquing him and why I was critiquing him and preparing him to be able to deliver this presentation as if he's the expert. And using simple presentation techniques to put emphasis on the right things and right focus and so forth. And he was so appreciative of that. A year later, he was, and it's kind of like I was just doing my job.
Yeah,
giving him the mentorship that he needed to be successful. And yeah, to me, that the sense of accomplishment I felt that day, not the day he told me this, I felt that it's something that I got out of it, and it's a reminder that I got to stick to my guns. I've been in his program for a while, so I know what works. So let's make sure he does.
Well, and when you relay that story, it sounded like it was an individual who I'm making assumptions here, Dave.
Mm-hmm.
It sounded like this individual might not have gotten that feedback in the past, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, and in fact, they sound like they're possibly very teachable, right? They just never had the coaching, the mentorship, the leadership to guide them in the right way, right? And I do want to. It's not a rant, but I do have a thing around that. A sore spot there where your job is to coach people, right? It is to make people better. It is to make. It's another quote that really sticks with me is like a great coach or mentor is someone who tells you not what you want to hear, is what you need to hear. Right? And it can be done in a very kind way, a firm but kind way. It's like, hey, you're not cutting it, and here's why, right? And I want to help you improve. And here's the things, let's work together. And like what you said, I have all night, right? I'm committed to doing this all night with you if we have to. But I guess like when you, I think this flows into my next question for you, Dave, is when you are looking at good leaders, right? What are some of the common qualities that they have that you look for?
They say don't hire in your image. So we got to avoid that.
Hire me because we clearly look alike. We have the same name.
Same name. I think there's kind of, I go back to kind of my values. And you can go through a list of items in terms of kind of what you're looking for as a manager. You can do, are they intuitive? Do they have a sense of integrity? Do they have confidence? Is something that comes to mind. But there's three things that I really do look for, and I feel it's part of my DNA. One is compassion. You need to spend time with people. You need to understand what drives them, what doesn't drive them, and understand kind of what their reality is like on the personal level. On the business side of it, integrity, trust, honesty. Like actually, those three kind of meld together a little bit. from a business perspective, and also from a personal. You can apply it to. It should be applicable to personal and business in terms of your role. And the last one, which I don't think a lot of people spend a lot of time on, is celebration of accomplishments, recognition of the accomplishments, because sometimes we can get so down in the dumps about something that went wrong. But in the meantime, you have other successes that you can draw on that because otherwise you drain the energy out. And this is an intense job. From a standpoint of it, you need to the energy level that you need to maintain over a period of time is something that people need to be concerned about. And you talk about health, you talk about wellness, all of those support your ability to do that. And I think that's one of the things that I was fortunate that I spent some time on my fitness. It's pretty intense. It's pretty time consuming in terms of the number of days that I think I only slept 4 hours or 5 hours, and that was it. It's like that was so bad. I should never have done that. But in the meantime, so I think those are the kinds of things that I look for. I listed a bunch of other items there in terms of maturity and interplay with people, and you have, but that's day-to-day stuff. If you're having challenges, that's something you can learn. But sense of accomplishment is to me something you walk away with, and you can take to your next role or to your next retirement, whatever.
Yeah, sense of accomplishment. It's what I do want to make a comment on that, Dave, like sense of accomplishment, because one of the things that early in my leadership career, I sort of took it for granted, honestly. Like, hey, you're doing a good job, and you don't need a pat on the back all the time, right? There's a balance there, though, right? I think one of the things I learned working with a coach myself, like an executive coach, was praise the process, not the outcome, right? I think there's a lot of talks out there about a growth mindset. Carol Dweck is really famous for that. Mm-hmm. But it's about praising the process. Like if someone did something, let's just say they create a new hiring process, right? It may or may not have worked, but praise the fact that they went out there and they tried something and they created it, right? And they tried it out. But also, at the same time, look for the areas of improvement. What would you do differently next time, right? Mm-hmm. If it didn't work. And that's one of the things I've learned, like praising people, it's not always about the outcome. It's the process. And I've learned that, to praise people for that. And it's actually changed how I approach things. Like, yes, you got to celebrate big wins and all that's pretty obvious. It's important for the morale of the team, for the brand of the individuals. But my God, those little things you do, like, hey, good job on, I like how you put this process together. Oh, I love how your thought process during that meeting and how you put up your hand, right? And talked about that. That's probably one of the biggest learnings that I've had over the years is praise the process, right? Mm-hmm. So I'm glad you brought that up. Is just praising, like accomplishments.
I think, and I'll take it to one step further there, and that is, you talk about there's failures. Sense of accomplishments is also an ability to allow yourself to fail. You push yourself to get to whatever idea or whatever activity you're trying to do, but if you fail, what do you do with that knowledge? Because you've actually created knowledge of here's my idea, here's the result. Now, what do I learn from that? And the sense of accomplishment to me is also part of that process, is that you've actually tried. And now I am going to learn in terms of the next item that I'm going to try and facilitate, whether it's taking it one step further, backing up, redesign, whatever the case may be. But having the right to fail is, a lot of people are very cautious sometimes, and maybe overcautious because they're afraid that they will fail. And as a manager, you need to be able to make people comfortable that they can fail.
Yeah.
Now, there are certain things like you can't drive backwards off of an interstate here. That's
You can't.
no. But those are more.
I just did it the other day.
They're more terminal. Yeah.
It's not life and death, is what you're saying.
No, it's not life and death. And this goes back to this individual that I kept for a long time on his architectural presentations. The idea was he had to learn from every one of his mistakes. And in the end, he really appreciated that. And he learned a lot from doing that. And that's, I think, part and parcel with accomplishments and making sure there's recognition. Because recognition of failures is also a plus in my mind. And that's kind of the way I've looked at it from many points.
Yeah, and those are the leaders and coaches and mentors that I still respect to this day. Those who accepted it, and it's kind of like it's baked into the hiring process.
Mm-hmm.
If I'm going to hire you into this, mistakes are baked into the whole package, right? It's not perfection I was hiring you for, but the folks who actually took the time, right, took the time to explain things and try to make you better, right? Like those are the people you just don't forget to this day. Like some of the folks I reflect on from years ago. My God, to this day, it's amazing. What I wouldn't be here if they just gave up on me and said, you know what, you're a screw up. See you later.
Yeah.
Right. And I appreciate that. Well, look, I do want to ask you a few more, I guess we can call it wrap-up questions. Right?
Okay.
I do want to ask you, so, we started talking about hybrid work and all that, but and this is a very broad question, Dave. When you look at the world right now, what do you think it's going to be? How do you think the world's going to be in 5 years?
I have a pat answer for that. Chat
What's that
GBT.
Chat GPT.
What would they say?
That's a great question, Dave.
Well, it won't profess love for you.
Actually,
it did.
I think it actually told a journalist to leave their spouse. In one situation. That's amazing, by the way.
So the challenge with predicting what's going on in 5 years is because I could not have told you where I was even 3 years ago, where I am now. And as going back to an earlier comment I made, I feel extremely lucky throughout my career that as long as I was willing to take on whatever challenge was given to me, that I would be able to take it on. And of many of the accounts that like companies that I've worked for, I started as an SE. I didn't start as a manager. I came from a management role. I said, no, I want to go back to being an SE. I want to understand what's going on with technology. I want to get back and get my feet wet and my hands wet. And I really did enjoy that lifestyle, life activity. And of course, needless to say, they turn around and say, well, you've got some management experience on your life. Okay, we're going to make you manager. And in fact, I have a story for that one. I was a line manager for Siebel. And we had a management meeting on the East Coast. All the managers across the U.S. and Canada came in. And I got about halfway through the event, all the managers in one room. They were about to talk about changes and reorging of the sales organization and how we were going to go against that. And I got this little tug. I'm in the back of the room. It's usually where I go, back of the room. And I got this little tug on my shirt, and I look back, and it's my boss. And she says, well, you want to come out with me? And okay. And I'm walking outside, and there's another senior exec manager. And Val said to me, congratulations. You now report to him. And I was just like, oh, okay. So why did you have to pull me out of the room just to tell me that? And then he says, oh, there's 9 managers in there that will report to you. And I was like, what? I'm going from a line manager to a second line? And now I'm thinking, okay, who are the 9? The entire Eastern Seaboard. And it's like, what the hell is going on here? But you got to roll with the punch, so to speak. And so that I wanted to make sure you heard that story, because you just never know when something's going to happen.
Yeah.
And you got to prepare yourself that you can't react. You have to kind of like, okay, what do I do next? What's the scenario? And then you go out and figure out how you're going to deal with it. And that to me is what's going to happen in 5 years, bringing it back to that. Technology-wise, we're seeing dramatic changes going on here. With, you got your chat PT. I'm having a challenge with those letters. You have all of this cloud technology.
I hope Google wins there, because it's just called Bard. It's just easier. Just purely based on the name. I hope they win this battle, right? Chat GPT is not exactly the best marketing slogan, right? So,
well, Google's never been known to do that. But
we'll put that aside.
Yeah,
right?
put that
or
aside.
Maybe they can just buy the rights to the name. We'll call it Bard GPT or something.
Yeah. No, from what I say in 5 years is, for me, again, this is a personal thing. I'm at that stage in my life where I have to make sure that financially I'm secure. I am secure from a standpoint of safety, so to speak. I have potential opportunity to go travel quite a bit, subject to wars that are brewing somewhere. But from a standpoint of work, it's like when what was it, when VMware came out? Not VMware. Who was it? Well, when the web became popular, there's lots of places where they were talking about technologies were getting more efficient, and you need less people to operate the software. And I was like, you know what? All of my experiences in terms of technology has been, it's like Gordon Moore's Moore theory. It's just going to double in terms of the needs and the people that need to facilitate the actual use of the technologies that are going to be out there. Maybe it's not exactly the same job description, but in 5 years, I would say that you're seeing a lot of change going on right now. Digital banking, this is going to be pretty interesting to see where that goes. You have your space activity going on right now, in terms of all the various organizations competing to be the big man on Mars first. Those are the kinds of things that are happening. Does that impact me personally? Not directly, but it's, technology just keeps moving along, and Moore's law is pretty well has been correct so far. So double it up, and we'll see what happens.
Well, it might affect you. Your family might say, "Well, Dad, I'll see you in Tokyo in 2 hours." Space travel, right?
I have to get that phone call first.
oh, that's another podcast.
Yeah. No, Dad, I need to go to Tokyo. Can you send me some money?
Send me some money. Just some petty cash. 5 years.
No, I think I look at my family, and we have a joint family, and each of them have different careers. Each of them, in fact, successes and so forth. But I look to them to see kind of where things are going, and honestly, the whole aspect of focus on the planet and all of the aspects of the social conscience that's going on right now. I think that's, when you look at volunteer activities and so forth, that's kind of where it's at. And I think that's in the next 5 years is where a lot of focus is going to be put, at least at my level.
Yeah. Yeah.
And
And you know, like what you're saying about, yeah, I remember even as a kid, people talking about, oh, the computer's going to take away jobs and factories don't need as many workers anymore. Yes. But, you know, as human beings, and I think it's a good thing about the human race is that we will always find a way to do more
mhm,
with what we have, right? That's also the bad thing about the human race too, right? We have a way of messing things up and polluting things and messing it.
yeah,
Um, but to think that ChatGPT is going to say, "Oh, put a bunch of people out of jobs," no, they'll find new jobs, right? We
retrain.
have a way of, yeah, they'll retrain and do something else. I mean, history has taught us that, right?
Hmm.
There won't be fewer jobs. It's just that job just won't exist anymore, right?
Yeah.
But there will be a new job with new skills required. So it's going to be a new world, and I think about what it's going to look like for my kids. My kids are probably training right now for a job that doesn't exist yet. I'm
And
very sure.
and you that's an interesting point because I you know I was in the same career type for 36, 37 years.
Mm-hmm.
That's unknown. That in their world, that's going to be pretty well a non-starter.
Yeah,
They're going to be changing their careers on a regular basis. At least that's what I think. And their ability to learn quickly is going to be
yeah,
key to do that.
yeah. Well, well, thank you very much, Dave. I've been thinking about how to end this podcast since this is the inaugural podcast that we have. I've been making it up on the spot. What questions do you have for me? Let's see if this sticks. See if we're going to have to edit this one out.
Are you enjoying yourself?
Am I enjoying myself?
Yeah. Are you
Is this a broad
enjoying
question?
doing what? Are you enjoying doing what you're doing?
I enjoy what I'm doing. So this, you know, what I'm doing here right now with
Mhm.
you, this is a passion project, and you know, like I think when we first started talking in today's conversation, I asked about retirement and legacy and what you're going to do. It's something I've been thinking about for the last few years, right? I know you joke about like it's early. I don't think it's too early, and the reason why is I've seen too many friends, family members, etc., who when their version of retirement was going from purpose to no purpose,
Yeah.
and that scares me, and I don't want to be in that situation.
And
So
that's true.
yeah, and so when I look at what is this giving me, it's it's a finger pointing to the moon. I know that the direction is that way. I don't know where it's going to lead, but I know it gives me energy, right?
Hmm.
And so I guess you can call this as future proofing. Whatever I'm doing here, whatever this is going to become, I don't know. And you know how it supplements my day job as a leader. I think it's actually, you know, we talk about growth mindset.
Uh-huh.
We've talked over the years. I thought I know you. I think I do know you, but there's always something else I'm learning about you, right? And I learned a lot from you today. And so,
I appreciate that.
for me, as long as I'm learning, I'm going to enjoy myself, right? But the moment where something gets stagnant and it's like, you know, and I don't have autonomy,
Hmm.
then it's, you know what, it's time for me to do something else, right?
Yeah.
But I'm very fortunate professionally. I'm in a place where I like to call it, I've been asked to paint a Mona Lisa. I've been given a picture. Here's how the Mona Lisa looks. Go make your own version now, right? And I'm allowed to paint my own version of Mona Lisa, right? And so I'm still stimulated in my job, and this gives me energy as well because it keeps me learning. So,
Hmm. And I think that's the big thing. I have to do the same thing. Like we talk about, there's always a project. Like I don't have any time to take on anything more. It's well, whether you're talking about renos, whether you're talking about all of the aspects of keeping my network active. That in itself is a job. Like some, so you might think that kind of different, but it's when you are retired, people are all focused on their careers. There's no doubt about that. But now you have family and your work life has now kind of collided into one.
yeah,
And now the focus and the emphasis is different, but it's basically the same. You still have the same things in terms of when you're talking to them in terms of what's happening with their lives and how you are interfaced with that. That's kind of a key. And then all of the aspects and opportunities for volunteering and being part of the community is something that will keep you active. And if you follow anything in terms of the green zone of the world, the 5 green zones, where the average age is
blue zones. You mean.
The blue zone. Sorry.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yep. And the answer is yes. This is where a lot of my thought process comes from. Is years of learning about the blue zones, right? Actually, maybe to our listeners out there, the blue zones. You want to just quickly.
Well, there's 5 areas in the world where they have documented basically lifestyles of individuals, and they have a number of centurions has evolved from this in terms of long life, and it's speaking toward not just their food or their environmental aspects, but also their social structure and how they support each other, right from baby to oldest person in that group. And these are areas that, for whatever reason, the combination of those aspects have given longevity in terms of the people. And on the average, they're many over 100 years of age. So I can't remember all the places, but Costa Rica, Italy, Sardinia,
Sardinia,
Okinawa, and there's a place in California.
It was a California or Utah.
You could be right. Yeah. But there's a 5th one.
What I found amazing about that was, and I read that years ago, and a lot of that goes into my current thinking, right? What was very surprising in those regions was that exactly, you think, oh, it's the food. It's not just that, but the other 2 things was a sense of community, right? The social side, right? A sense of belonging, right? And the other thing was purpose.
Oh, sorry. Yeah, that's an important one.
Having purpose. And purpose in Okinawa, one of the community, sense of community, so they all band together to work on a common project. And the purpose is to get, either it was like harvesting vegetables and doing it together, right? Mm-hmm. It wasn't about the money. It was about the community and the purpose, right? In their retirement life. And that's what I'm personally, back to, am I happy? I'm absolutely happy because I know I will have purpose, right? Mm-hmm. I have purpose now, right? My job gives me a lot of purpose. My kids give me a lot of purpose, but that can't be all, right? My kids can't be everything. There's a lot of things, but they can't be everything. Neither can my job, right? Especially my job. Yeah. And this is something, the proverbial working in the community, and I'm harvesting right now. And this is my way of giving back to the community, and I feel like I'm giving back in some way, some shape or form through this avenue. So
that's good. That's great. I won't ask you anything about work.
I'm still employed, and I plan to stay that way, Dave. I'm not retired yet, sir.
Yes, and you speak about your family. It's been a while since I've actually talked to you about your son and daughter, and of course your foot.
My foot. That foot's got a. So to the folks listening, years ago when I knew Dave, working in the same place, there's one day I came into the office, on crutches, and I tore my Achilles on my right foot. Years ago, on that same foot, when I was a teenager, I broke my ankle too. So this foot's just received so much damage over the years, right? I mean, there goes my career as an NBA player, right? All 7'10" of me.
Yeah, I was going to say.
Yeah, I know. I look like that, especially on this camera, 7'10".
There you go.
And my dry sense of humor, So, but yeah, it's been a pleasure talking today, Dave, and I've learned a lot from you, and I always learn a lot from you. So I appreciate it.
No, anytime I can help, not a problem.
All
Thank
right.
you, David, for the opportunity.